Have you ever come across a piece of fiction that just clicks for you? An idea so right, so strangely familiar that you feel as though you've known it your entire life? For me, that's how pretty much all of Tolkien's work feels when I read it. The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, it's all full of ideas crafted from a deep understanding of classic literature, folklore, language, things that are part of the world I occupy. Things that have already in some way inevitably touched me, long before I ever picked up the books or watched the films. Tolkien worked with some old magic. And yes, he used it to write about great wars, develop languages, devise long histories. Those are all a part of this. But for me, out of everything he put into his stories, the one singular element that makes me feel this the most is the Ents, the guardians of the wood, the living trees, a race who only features for about one chapter in one book. It may not be the most important part of the tale, but it's certainly one of the more interesting bits. A big thanks to Campfire writing and world-building software for making this video possible. And a big thanks to our Patreon supporters as well. We love you. If you haven't read Tolkien's work or seen the movies, when you finally do, you'll probably feel almost exactly how I did. When the Ents first appear, somehow, you are going to feel as though you recognize them. Maybe it's because, at first glance, they're easy to mistake for trees. They look exactly like the woods they watch over. Skin like bark, beards and hair made up of twigs and moss, many-toed feet like the bottoms of trunks where the roots delve into the earth, limbs like strong boughs, fingers like splayed branches. And they have as much variety as trees too. Among the Ents, those who resemble the fir are the tallest. The ones who take after ash have many more fingers than the rest and a gray complexion. Those of the chestnut lineage are dark and brown and stout. Right down to their toes, through every leaf and limb, Ents are trees. Just trees given a will and the ability to use it. And what could possibly be more familiar than a tree? Of course we recognize this creature. It's all around us. Okay, but if we're being honest, you might also just recognize it because it's all over modern fantasy too. There's tree Ents in Dungeons & Dragons, there's tree folk in Magic the Gathering and 5 billion other properties, literally countless examples of talking trees. Like almost all of Tolkien's ideas, Ents have become an archetype with a life of their own, and it's easy to see why. When I began research for this video, I thought I would figure out where Ents came from, what Tolkien's inspiration was. I figured there would be some clear basis in folklore, but nope, nothing. In his letters, he says that they were a spontaneous invention. He knew Frodo would go on a tree adventure at some point, but that was about it. He admits that maybe part of the Ents' involvement in the story was inspired by Macbeth, when Malcolm's men disguise themselves in the forest by holding up boughs, creating the illusion that the forest is marching, but that really doesn't tell us much. How could Tolkien have devised something so natural, so evocative that it would be carried this far throughout literature and media on a random whim? I suspect Tolkien didn't really come up with this idea at all. Maybe the finer details, but I think what brought Tolkien to this concept is the same thing that makes it feel so very familiar and resonant to us. Again, the simple fact that these are trees, and trees mean something. We know them. We see this across the world throughout history and mythology. Yggdrasil, the world tree of Norse myth, whose branches span the 9 realms of creation. Sacred oaks that whispered the wisdom of the ancient Greek oracles. The leaves of the banyan tree, said by some to be the resting place of the Hindu god Krishna. Across the British Isles, hawthorn trees have been given as the home of fairy folk. There is an undeniable affinity in mankind, and in me, for trees. Not just a sense of awe and appreciation, but a sort of kinship, I feel. They're the old life of the world. Generations pass, and patiently, quietly, trees watch. They shelter and protect, they nourish, they remember. Trees have always been thought of as wise and beneficent, living beings connected to the land in a way humans could never be. And you can see all of these qualities borne out in Tolkien's vision. "Do not be hasty," says Treebeard, perhaps the oldest of the Ents. It's his motto. He, like all the other Ents, moves with the slow deliberation of something which has grown in the earth for ages, all the time in the world for asking the proper questions, thinking hard about the correct answers. The very language they speak, Old Entish, is so accurate and true to the nature of things, it takes a very long time indeed to say anything in it. At one point in the story, one of the hobbits uses the word hill, and Treebeard calls it a hasty word for a thing which has stood here ever since this part of the world was shaped. But he also says that they don't say anything in the language that isn't worth taking a very long time to say. Even Old Entish names are hopelessly long-winded because, like the Ents themselves and the trees they come from, their names and words are growing all the time. I don't see this as a simple matter of patience or slowness. I see it as a depth of respect for the world they occupy, which we could scarcely ever hope to understand. They even have an Old Entish song that lists all the creatures and races of the land, which Treebeard knows by heart. Between their ancientness, their connection to the world, the kindness they treat the protagonists of the story with, their willingness to offer help, protection, safety, I think it's safe to say Tolkien nailed the general character of trees here. He tapped into something we've all been aware of, but lacked the language for, and made it live, which is incredible. But he also wasn't the first. Because of all the qualities we imbue trees with, it's a very natural thing to characterize them. They develop into a kind of anima loci, a Latin phrase which means the soul of a place, and come to life in our minds. Hamadryads in ancient Greek myth were a type of nature spirit that lived within a tree, bound to it so that when one died, so would the other. In the English county of Somerset, there's an old folk song which goes, "Elm do grieve, oak he do hate, willow do walk, if you travels late." Whether he knew it or not, in creating the Ents, Tolkien was simply participating in an old tradition. Although this particular creature is his, the idea of the ensouled, living, feeling, thinking tree is as old as time. Of course, there's another side to this. Trees are not just beings of deep time, reverence, beneficence. They're also the ones who shroud the wood in darkness. When the wind blows, it's the trees you hear howling and moaning over the hills, branches creaking like old bones. How many dried fingertips have come scrabbling at your window in the night? How many strange faces have you found glaring out from the gnarled knots in old trunks? My mind goes to examples like the tree from the movie Poltergeist and, well, actually, we won't talk about the tree from Evil Dead. Just take my word, it's not very nice. And why should it be? Mankind has not made their existence particularly easy. On the one hand, I think this is just a primordial fear. Strange shapes in the dark, large, looming figures that obscure our vision and hide our paths. Simple enough. On the other hand, I think if we can give trees souls, if we're so able to bestow upon them all these empathetic traits, why shouldn't that include bad ones too? If it had the faculties, might elm mourn his fallen friends? Might oak grow a hatred over the long years of abuse? Might willow rise up out of the ground and stalk you, one of its few true predators, if only it had legs? In Ireland, there are solitary ash trees that are left alone because they're believed to be the home of fairies or witches, and to harm them is to call a grisly revenge down upon yourself. Any sentient being treated the way humans treat trees would be a little bitter, and Tolkien's Ents are no exception. According to his extended lore, the reason Ents exist at all is because the goddess who created them and all of the natural flora and fauna of his world was afraid for her children. She knew that sentient beings, like humans and especially dwarves, would want to exploit them for resources. So she made a plea to a god of higher authority who sent great spirits to live among and within the plants and beasts she had created, where they would, quote, be held in reverence and their just anger feared. Thus, we have Ents, among other mighty wilderness spirits. They are the tree herds, standing watch over the woods. They prefer to live their days in peace, roaming the wilderness, speaking with their good friends the trees. But once in a great while, when their trees or their lives are threatened, the Ents can be roused to anger, and it is a terrifying sight. When they march, thrumming and booming and singing in their ancient tree-ish tongue, it appears as though the entire forest woke up and mustered for war. Imagine that kind of power. Something so docile, so ancient and mighty, coming down on you in a wave of fury. As demonstrated in the two towers, their capacity for destruction is quite complete. They just don't use it as often as humans do. Although it's not just Ents who do the protecting. In Treebeard's words, there are Ents and Ents, you know. Or there are Ents and things that look like Ents, but ain't. Over the long years, some Ents grow tired and tree-ish, some trees grow wakeful and Entish, but in between the two, a new creature emerges, much closer to those grasping figures in the dark wood we've all imagined before. They are called horns, and they can be quite a bit more malevolent than the difficult-to-rouse Ents. They lie in the deepest parts of the wood, lost in their years of contemplation, many of them fostering a slow, black, rotting hatred for men, and dwarves, and orcs, and all the races that would exploit them. They wrap themselves in shadow, and when angered, can move swift enough that they can barely be seen before it's too late. Between the Ents and horns and watchful trees, the forests of Tolkien's world are full of eyes and emotions. And, after a fashion, that's how we view the forests of our world, too. As a writer, I think the reason I was drawn to this idea, the reason I wanted to make a video about it, is because it demonstrates such a deep understanding of a tradition that I think we take for granted. Yes, we just spent more than 10 minutes talking about trees, but there's that much and more to say about them. We've been animating trees in our minds for so long, it's almost second nature to us now. I think it's the same instinct that guided Tolkien to create the Ents. I think this is an example of a writer embracing the identity of their inspiration rather than trying to impose their creative will onto it. That is so powerful, and certainly something worth trying in your own world building. Of course, it's one thing to tell you to try something with your world building, it's another to actually give you the means to do it. Luckily, I know just the tool for the job. Campfire Blaze will make trying this, and all the other world building you want to do, easy. If you're not familiar, Campfire Blaze is a browser-based suite of tools to help you keep your writing organized. You can collaborate with friends in real time, or work by yourself to flesh out every facet of your story. Create characters, design your plot, and world build every single piece of your setting, all in one place. When it comes time to turn your world into a story, you can also develop your entire manuscript right there in Blaze's word processor. When you're done, sharing your work with your friends and fans is incredibly easy. No more sending out 30 different copies of your manuscript. You also have a lot of freedom to customize how you pay for it. Start with the free version, then expand by buying just the tools you need and keep them permanently, or build a subscription by adding features for as little as 50 cents a piece, which means to use everything you'd only be paying a few dollars a month. And if you're on the fence about it, no risk. There's a 30-day return policy. Follow the link in the description to learn more. Write better stories faster with Campfire Blaze. Before we wrap up, I'd like to give a quick thanks to all the helpful humans who support the show on Patreon. All those words you see scrolling in the background of these videos, those are actually the names of our Patreon maintenance crew, without whom this show would be impossible. And a special word to all of our top patrons, Lord Gate, RPG Grenade, and the Autumn Rider, thank you so much. And that's it for this video. There's usually a few weeks between uploads, so if you want more Tale Foundry in the meantime, come join our community. We have a Discord server that's basically like a big family of creatives, a lot of love there. We also run public writing groups on Twitch every single week if you want to get some practice in. You can find links to all of it in the description. Hope to see you there. Until then, thanks for watching and keep making stuff up. I'll see you next time. Bye!